You won't. All righty. Good morning. Welcome to Grace Christian Fellowship. Glad to have you here today. Let's see, a couple different things. The ladies have used up all their goodwill. They have no events coming up here now. So heard they had a great time at the Women's Hand in Hand yesterday. Very blessed. Let's see, we got a couple things coming up. The Men's Action Bible Study is going to be on September 30th. Look at the date down at the bottom. We're going to do our men's retreat this Saturday. So there you go. Make sure you put that on your alarms, on your clocks, and everything else, so that way you're there and be part of that. And there you go. If you have any questions, ask me about that. And then, it looks like we just completed our Word Yard Party for the Men's Action, and then we're looking for some other stuff coming up here. So any input on that, make sure you give that to Roel up there or to myself. And definitely be in prayer for that, how the men can be involved, blessing the church. I always think about in Timothy where it talks about he instructs the men to pray. You know, I know it is, ladies, I love your prayers, but you know, the Bible doesn't even have to tell you to do it. You just do it. It has to tell us guys to do it. By the way, pray. And the guy's like, oh, okay, if I get around to it. And you know, that's the way we are. So there you go. So definitely keep that in mind. Is there anything else going on that we need to be aware of? No? Okay. Here you go. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All righty. On that note, let's pray and dive into God's Word this morning. Father God, we just thank you now as we get ready to praise you and worship you in the Word. Father, I just pray that you would just pour out your Spirit upon us to open our eyes to the things you want to share to us. Open our ears to allow us to listen, Lord. Soften our hearts, Lord, so that we have fertile ground for the seed of the Word to land onto, Lord. And I pray, Father, that you would let it ruminate around in our hearts and minds so that we just don't just leave out of here like, boy, I can't even remember what we talked about. Lord, let it find purchase. And we just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Remember Lot's wife. Genesis 19, verse 23 to 29. Kind of funny, when I picked the title, but then I was looking around for some other stuff later on, and it was kind of funny how many pastors use this exact title for this spot in Scripture. And it's like, oh, okay. Nothing original here. But it's still interesting to think about because we're going to see in a moment that that's actually a statement from Jesus. Jesus used those very words. And so it's always good to copy the master. And the other title I was thinking about, which I used for the first section, was just the idea is just like any other day. Just like any other day. I think I saw a funny comedian that said, you know, every murder mystery starts out with the statement, it was just like any other day. So that way, you know, when I wake up in the morning, I try to do something different every day. So that way it's just not like any other day. That way no serial killer is going to get me on that day.
Or it's an original story.
So the whole idea is when disaster often strikes, it was just like any other day. And Jesus reiterates that when he teaches about the end times. I'm going to read extensively from Luke 17, verse 28 through 33. Because Jesus just captures it so well. And he says, likewise, just as it was in the days of Lot. He's referencing Lot. It says, they were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. That's what everybody does, right? They're all doing the things of our day. The things that help us make it to the next day. Those are what we do. That's the story of humanity. That's what we're all about. Verse 29, but on the day when Lot went out from Sodom, fire and sulfur rained from heaven and destroyed them all. So it will be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. that day, let no one who is on the housetop with his goods in the house not come down to take them away. And likewise, let no one who is in the field not turn back. Verse 32, remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will keep it. That's again the story. My treasure box doesn't get it, and then the floor falls out from underneath them, and that's all. That's the end of them. And as they're doing it, everybody in the audience is like, "No, don't go get it. Leave it alone." And of course, they never listen to us. We're telling them how to survive, and they don't pay attention. And that's the idea, though, because in this scene, in this day, for these guys, when the people of Sodom and Admah and Zeboim and Gomorrah were all waking up this day, just like any other day. Remember our scene before, as we were getting up to this, is like Lot and those guys, they requested an itinerary change last week. They're like, hey, let's go up to we want to go, instead of going up to the hills, we want to go to Zoar. We want to go to this place. It's just a little place to go to. It's just little. So we discussed that the ramifications is just, well, yeah, it seems like a little sinning place, but just a little sinning place will get us. And so the God's graciousness allows him to make that decision. He says, so go ahead. But as we looked at, we know, Lot didn't realize, but we know that all these decisions were going to be painful decisions. God said, okay, go ahead, but you're going to pay a price to make that decision. So we come to verse 23 in Genesis chapter 19. It says, the sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. So it seems to imply, because I have to believe, as they're getting out of town, the angels drag him out of town, it's like, go to Zoar. It's close by, it's a little place, so it's close enough. Because I remember, I know that when I've walked a significant amount of miles, it feels like that's a long time. I think the human walking speed is generally about 2 or 3 miles an hour, maybe. So it must not be too far away. So now the angels could act. They were the destroyers. And yet, I want to keep in mind, reiterate, I believe, especially the city of Sodom and the other guys, they had warning. They had warning. They knew something was up. The men of the city might have had some idea that something was afoot. But at least we know the son-in-laws knew. They were told. They're like, get out of the city. It's going to get wiped out. Oh, whatever. Father-in-law. You've lost it. You've gone crazy. Of course, I always think about that. That's the moment when they're like, oh, no, he wasn't crazy. like here it is. So they, like anybody, meant a lot of people were just unprepared. The majority of humanity is unprepared for the judgment of God that is coming. They're just unprepared. And then when these people usually try to tell them, they mock them. Oh yeah, whatever. You doomsday people. Things are just going to keep going on as it always was, as Peter said. They're just, then and now, it's just they're not ready. For the majority of humanity, even today they woke up. Our neighbors and friends all around us are waking up on a Sunday morning like it's just any other Sunday morning. Not realizing what's going on. And we can understand the attitude. Scripture captures that attitude. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, when it's Paul's talking about the end times again. And he says, while people are saying there is peace and security. Isn't that what everybody wants? Everybody wants that. Peace and security. Then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. It's going to be sudden. Earlier in that passage, it reminds us that the day of the Lord will be like a thief in the night. In other words, it's going to be unexpected. Even for us as Christians, as we're watching diligently, when's Jesus going to come? It's going to surprise us too, I think, to a certain extent. Even though we're alert, and we should be alert. He tells us to be alert. but there it is, peace and security. And if we believe Jesus Christ for the free gift of salvation, we've changed. But even as we've changed, Paul tells us that even in this, there's a certain part of us that has changed. Our inner soul has been made new. Our spirit has been made alive. But our flesh is still a barrier. So even when we think about God, even the greatest theologians who have had the deepest thoughts about God are only seeing him dimly. Kind of fuzzy, if you will, because of our human limitations, our human condition that we all struggle with to try to live and walk out with God, but our flesh is working against us all the time. And so our flesh, being what it is, will want to lull us into a false comfort. Right? It totally does. I mean, who wants to sleep with just a wool blanket without sheets? Nobody does. I remember that's the one thing in the Navy, they gave us all the old U.S. military blankets. Sheets is the only thing that makes them comfortable. Otherwise, it might as well be like, hey, let's get a little bit of Scotch-Brite on my skin here. Yeah, good to go. Yeah, exactly. I got my 80 grit blanket here. And so our flesh will lull us into this false sense of comfort. And so that even Christians sometimes, rather than rejoicing for his blessed return, we hesitate and we'll have foreboding in our heart. We're like, well, is Jesus coming? I don't know. I have so many appointments to deal with today. So many things that I need to get done before Jesus comes. So many dreams, so many plans I got to do before Jesus comes. And that's great. But then one part of it is foreboding. Hold on a minute, Jesus. Just wait. But see, the thing is all of us have plans. All of us have things, gifts, purposes, motivations, all those things. But in the end, our greatest motivation should be that Jesus is coming. So that should drive us, should motivate us. I always hear people say, well, yeah, they criticize that idea. It's like, oh, you get so heavenly minded, you don't do anything. No. Like if we know that heaven's there and you know that hell is there, it increases the motivation to think about that, to be aware, to pay attention. That's the thing. I'm telling you, it's easy to forget. It's a moment for me when I'm going around town to remind myself I'm surrounded by people that don't know Jesus. Doing their things. And it's just, you've got to think about that. Well, at that moment, as it was like any other day, we come to verse 24. I even added a graphic to this to kind of, that was to me one of the best pictures that really kind of showed what was going on. Because it says, and then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. There it was. No escape, just like that. Boom. So this indicates, because we're reading the Bible, I believe in God. I believe that he can act. I believe this was all from him. A judgment from God. It came like a storm from above. It said this sulfur and fire. Good King James picture is fire and brimstone. And this is where you get your fire and brimstone, preachers from. It's from this. Fire and brimstone. And the whole idea of brimstone is, we have the word sulfur there. It's really talking about something that's flammable. Like, the same word is used for like the guys that they've been cut pitch off a tree and throw it in the fire or trying to get it going. It's something that's flammable. So whatever's coming out of there is flammable, burning. I almost thought about the idea, it's almost like God had a heavenly flamethrower. Straight down, woof, got you. You ain't getting away. And there is evidence. See, remember back in the day we were talking about, well, where is Sodom and Gomorrah? Where are these cities? We don't know. for sure. There's good ideas, but we don't know. But there's one location up on the northern side where people are always pretty excited about it. That when they dug through this one city, where they found, like, literally, whatever happened there burned the city so much that it literally reglazed pottery. Because they found pottery that was broken, but it was glazed on both sides. And they're like, that's kind of weird. Who would do that? And what it was from flame. Because they found a burn layer in there. Just, burn layer all through the whole rubble. Where it was just a massive, highly intense flame. So they're pretty excited about that. That could be where Sodom and Gomorrah is at, especially Sodom. It could be. But it's still the idea that something, whatever happened, was so hot that it truly melted the area. Brought it down. And it's, like I said, it's from the Lord out of heaven, suggesting this is not a volcano, even though the area is known for that activity. There's a lot of lava beds all around the area. So it's possible, but what's interesting is like the Greek word, because there's a Greek translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint. The Greek word they use for this is called theon, which they use for brimstone, but it literally means God's fire. So for whatever they look at it, like this is God's fire coming down. However, he brought it about. So it's kind of interesting, though, because God has a pattern in this later on. Especially you have to think Moses is writing about this, and they had already seen some of this action. The Israelites had seen this firsthand. Remember, when they had one of the plagues was hailfire coming down. Hail that had fire attack. Glad that doesn't happen every day. It's just like you see fields burning all the time. So that kind of plague. Remember, as they were guiding around at nighttime, there was a pillar of fire coming down from God. So God would guide them and show them, give them light at night from this pillar of fire. My favorite always is Elijah's Baal barbecue, where, it's just like he's challenging the prophets of Baal and dunked the altar with water several times, but then God sent fire out of heaven, lit it right up. Now in the final battle, there is going to be a final battle, and described in Revelation later on, when all the people of earth, after the tribulation, they rebel against Jesus because Satan gets let loose one last time. He twists the hearts of a lot of the people who are there, and they all come to go after the people of God. Well, God meets them this way and defeats them with fire. Revelation 20, verse 9, it says, "And they," that would be this army marching against God, "marched up over the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city." Thought they had them, but no. But fire came down from heaven and consumed them. Just, there you go. Fighting against, it's just, once again, proving, even to the very end, you just don't want to pick a fight with God. God will win. And he just blasted them. So this whole idea of fire from heaven and that possibility, to me, is totally just legit. God can do that. Could it have been some other way? Hey, maybe. But I think God's perfectly capable of doing it. Now we come to the other part of the story that we are all very familiar with. I called this section, "We Had It So Good." Verse 25, Genesis 19, "And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the city and what grew on the ground." So who were those cities? Those cities were Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboiim. Those are the other four of the five. Because remember, the fifth city was Zoar. Saved by Lot begging to go there. Like, I want to go there. Send me to a city. And that's scared Zoar. And so these were the same cities that rebelled against the kings of the north in Genesis 14. This was their moment. They met Abraham. They even had Melchizedek there. Remember, Melchizedek met Abraham, and they were at this conference too. They saw what this guy do. He was saying Abraham's the guy. They could have listened in. Who is this Abraham guy? What's he about? Who's this God, this holy God, this living God? We want to find out about him. They couldn't, but no. They're like, hey, when can we get back to camp? That was all they were interested in. It was that moment in time when they could have repented. Especially since it was such a humiliating defeat for them. Now, one interesting thing is he talks about who he overthrows here and all the inhabitants of the city that he's taken out. But another element here I noticed is he talks about in what grew on the ground. I thought that was interesting. That caught my attention a little bit. Because remember, this is what caught Lot's attention. Remember when he and Uncle Abraham were talking about where to go? And it says in Genesis 13:10 that this fertility of this land caught his attention. It said, and the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, and like the land of Egypt. In other words, this was a great place to go. It was highly prosperous. Lots of food can be grown there. A lot of animals can be raised there. This was the place to be. And yet the Lord destroyed even what grew on the ground. That material, the material attractiveness was going to be wiped out too. Not just what was going on in the cities. You had to take care of it. It's like, this whole valley has got problems. And so he's going to take care of that area. So the material wealth is really part of the element that led them down this path of moral depravity, if you will. And that seems to be the case of so many cultures throughout history. Something we as Americans should really pay attention to. It's just nothing new. It's when wealthy cultures get wealthy, how they begin to use their free time is usually a 50-50 shot of how good it's going to be. 50% some extra production, think about how to do that. 50% of wastefulness, which begins to actually become lopsided the more material wealth they have. Of course, my favorite thing is I always think about the Roman civilization because it's just so many lessons to be learned. And I have a couple quotes here. One from a daughter of a famous historian in her own right. It says, a great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself within. Boy, that just hits me with emotion, thinking about where we are. Then the next quote comes from Edward Gibbon, and he wrote the book, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's a great book. It says, in the 2nd century of the Christian era, that would be like 200 AD, in the Empire of Rome, the gentle but powerful influences of laws and manners had gradually cemented the union of the provinces. Their peaceful inhabitants enjoyed and abused the advantages of wealth and luxury. That's the whole thing. They abused it. Because that's how bad it got. It was horrible there. I've told you before, whereas toward the end, there were Roman emperors that didn't even want to go to Rome. Because it was a cesspool. Cesspool of human depravity. Because of the wealth that they had. Of course, wealth isn't a bad thing, but again, it's how you use it. And how it's a dangerous thing because the flesh wants to use it for itself. All the time. Because, seeking luxury, it's a powerful human motivator. We want that, right? How many people want comfort? Like I said, you don't want that scratchy wool blanket. You want the nice, fuzzy comforter. Like, ooh, fuzzy, feels nice, yes. Wrap yourself in it. That's why I love it when it starts also getting winter time and I get on my chair and I get the fuzzy blanket. Nap time is a coming. And so it's a powerful but the problem is that search for comfort can also become our affliction. And this affliction struck home again on that fateful morning. Verse 26. But Lot's wife behind him looked back. And of course, one thing to keep in mind is they were at Zoar by the time this happened. They were in Zoar. And she goes and looks back. And I mentioned this before. It's not like she's walking along, like that, did a quick peek, and then suddenly what happens. No, she turns back. She's looking at it longingly, with affection. Some have suggested that it's possible, because Lot's wife is not mentioned until after this time, that maybe she is from Sodom. Possibility, we don't know. But even so, she's looking back, and others also suggest that in the wording there, it's possible that not only did she turn back, but that she started walking back. That is, because she's walking back towards the destruction. I think I got this quote up here from J. Vernon, that her body may have left Sodom, but her heart was still there. And that's so poignant. I don't know about you guys, but my heart sometimes has struggles. Struggles with this world, where I wish my heart, one part of my heart really all for Jesus, but another part of my heart's like, hey, check out that new thing. Check out that shiny thing. The world's calling me back. And that's where she was at. And of course we all know she reaped the penalty. The second half of verse 26, and she became a pillar of salt. She became a pillar of salt. This is, to me, is like in the Bible, there's always consequential things that happen. But this, to me, is one of the most poignant, amazing, I think supernatural things that happen for a consequence that's ever listed. So personal. They were told, don't look back. In other words, don't be like, oh, Sodom. I think even for us, when we think about the end times coming and what's going on, many of us struggles. It's like we don't want this world to end. We don't want the things of this world to come to an end. It's got a lot of cool stuff here, right? A lot of cool stuff that this world has provided and maybe will continue to provide. So much possibility, so much potential. It's hard for us to look away. It gets wiped out. We're like, oh, there it goes. Now again, there's potential that some people have said, well, we don't know how it's becoming a pillar of salt. I think God, again, could have just said pillar of salt. He could have used some of what was happening. Some have suggested that maybe a mound of something covered her and she became a mound of salt. But it's pretty much clear. It says a pillar of salt. We don't know for sure where that's at again. When I looked this up, there's a lot of pictures of some pillars out there. But they do have Mount Sodom. So it's hard to tell, but that is a mountain of salt. That's a mountain of salt, 700 feet tall and about 5 miles long as a mountain on the one side of the valley. And so it is called Mount Sodom. Now, is this Mrs. Lot? I don't think so. But it is interesting to consider. Like I said, there's other pictures of like pillars that are out there, but I have to imagine with weather being what it is, if somebody was a human-sized pillar of salt, that the weather would wear her down fairly easily. Of course, maybe Mr. Lot took a chunk off. He's going to need some salt and pepper for dinner later on. Too soon? But But there it is. And it's interesting. So why a pillar of salt?
Yeah.
Why a pillar of salt? Why would that? Well, I just kind of joked about it just a second ago. Salt in that culture, and even today, we put salt on it to add seasoning to our food, but in that culture, salt was the preservative. You had to keep your meat going, you would salt it, and that way it would preserve it, keep the bugs off of it and stuff. And so, there's irony in this. It's possible that God said, I'm going to make you a pillar of salt because you were longing for what used to be. You wanted to preserve that. Well, now you're going to be preserved as a testimony against that. And so there it is. The wickedness. It's a witness against the wickedness of Sodom and the associated cities. Now I have an extended conclusion here. Because where we go to next is we visit Abraham. He's up on the hills. He's looking out. He sees what's going on. Genesis 19:27 says, and Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Now this place where he stood before, this is right where he did his intercession. God told him what he was going to do. And he interceded for his nephew Lot. And he said, well, what about 50? What about 45? What about 40, 30, 20, 10? God said, okay, whoever's righteous, I'll get out of there. This was the spot. And so now he's standing in that spot and he's looking down. Verse 28, he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the land went up like smoke of a furnace. That'd be something to see. I know Sarah isn't too excited about this, but I love it when I see places where there are volcanoes. Especially the ones where they're spewing out lava. And I would love to go do one of those visits, to go check that out. I know, it's dangerous. You're like, Robbie, pay attention to Lot's wife. But still, the whole idea, there it is. But that's what he's seeing. And this also made me think of something that's going to be in the future. Think about, the Bible talks about the great prostitute, and the whore of Babylon is what she's called in Revelation. But in Revelation 18, it describes her demise. She's brought down. God brings her down. But how the world thinks about it, probably not like Abraham. Abraham's probably sorrowful. He doesn't know what's going on. He has hope, though. But in Revelation 18, it shows the hope of the world. It says, and the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her, and will see the smoke of her burning. Let's stop right there. But I think it's not only Abraham that's out on the hills watching. I have to imagine that kings all around the valley, rulers of their individual cities, are like, what's that burning over there? Who lives over there? Well, that would be Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboiim. They're getting awful crispy over there. What is going on? And now we won't be able to get our party goods from there. We won't be able to go someplace and have a good time, because those are the good time cities. That's where, when I think of what they're saying, that is their attitude. And that's the attitude of what the world's kingdoms will look at when God brings it all down. They're like, oh, it's all going away. And then I love what they say about Babylon. They say this about Babylon, but it could be said about Sodom too in verse 10. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And that's the way it was for Sodom. In a single moment, boom, went from just like any other day to a day of disaster. Verse 29, so it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. I love that idea. God remembered. We've seen this phrase a few times so far. But God remembers. Because you know what? Many of us, we have friends or family that are in Sodom, if you will. And we're praying, interceding, wishing and hoping that they would see the truth for what's going on. And I love that here it shows, or I guess somehow or another he's explaining to Adam, or Abraham. He said, Abraham, I got him out. So somehow he knows. He comforted him. He remembered him. When we're praying and interceding for our friends and family, which we should be doing, take heart. God remembers. Because it's more than just remembering. This word is paying attention. He's attending to it. He's marking it down. So don't give up. Don't stop. It's not the end yet. But it could be just like any other day. Pray for ourselves. Like I said, I get it. I understand. We all need material goods to make it through our days. Last time I checked, you guys all need food, need clothes, those things. But we know that the material wealth of the world, be it a little bit or a lot, whispers to us all the time, right up to that day. Again, as Jesus said in Luke 17, I want to read this again. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life will keep it. So, we should not be looking longingly back at the world. Some of us, after getting saved, we look longingly back at our lives before we were saved. Boy, oh boy. We suddenly put like rose-colored glasses over what we look back on. Oh, that was so great. When you're like, just a second. There was so much hopelessness, so much worry, so much anxiety, so much fear, so much immorality, so much dirtiness in my life back then. But we begin to lose sight of that, and we're like, oh, those were the days. And we look longingly back at that instead of longingly looking forward to the day when our Savior comes to take us home. And that's sad. Sad for myself and sad for any of us. And that becomes a problem. Father, as we prepare to worship you one more time. Father, I pray that you would catch our attention. Father, forgive us when we become enamored with what this world allegedly has to offer. Because it is a false comfort. Father, help us this day through the power of Christ and your filling of your Holy Spirit to turn our eyes to Jesus to love you, Lord, with all our heart, all our mind, all our soul. Lord, let us not look back. Let us look forward, ever forward. Help us to look to you, longing. Just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Worship the Lord one more time.
So on this last song, I don't know if we've done this in our church before, but I think most people have heard it all in all.